Good afternoon. Welcome to the FTD University webinar titled American Floral Trends Forecast 2018-2019, Turning Trends into Traffic. Today, you will learn the hot new color palettes and key elements of the American Floral Trends Forecast for 2018-2019, as well as how to use these trends to drive traffic into your shop. FTD Education Consultant J. Keith White, AIFD, will be leading this informative webinar. As partner and design director of A&K Productions, a special events company, Keith is known for his floral vision and extraordinary designs. No stranger to news media, Keith's programs and projects have been covered by broadcast, internet, and print journalism for nearly 3 decades. Sponsored by FTD, his masterful designs on the official vehicles and the annual Rose Parade have been viewed by millions. Once Keith is finished with his presentation, we will open the webinar up for questions. If you have a question, simply type it in the question box on the upper right side of your screen. Feel free to submit your questions during the presentation, and we'll hold them until the Q&A portion of the webinar. So without further ado, I would like to turn the call over to Keith to begin the webinar. Keith?
Thank you, Janet. And I would like to say thanks for joining in, and we welcome you to the American Floral Trends Forecast 2018-2019, Florist Review's preeminent style report developed for the floral industry. And so you say, how am I going to use these trends to help my business? That turning trends into traffic. Well, just to give you a brief history, our methodology behind all the trends is we identify persuasive styles. This includes interior design, fashion design, textile industries, global cultures, and even regional influences. All these factors influence consumer buying behaviors, which is so important, and it's consumers' product and style preferences. We have 8 leading industry consultants and 12 floral designers who contributed the information and compositions that illustrate all these interpretations of each one of the trends that we'll be showing today. And this provides a broader explanation, and understanding of each one of these trends. So when you look at trend applications, I go back to the word practical applications. How can you turn these trends into traffic? Well, by applying trends, and reviewing what we have to go over today in the webinar, purchasing and planning should become a little bit more easy for you if you follow the guidelines of the 4 trends, maybe the looks, the color palettes, different influences, elements that are involved in each one of the trends. So this again is a broad spectrum, but purchasing and planning is the important part to start of the dollar signs. To grasp people's attention is your visual display. Of course, I am one of those people, I'm always involved with the visual display end of putting things together for showrooms, of course with FTD makeovers, anything that involves the hook to get that customer in. So look carefully at each of the 4 trends and see where you might be able to utilize some of these items for visual display. Seasonal designs. Don't think of it as particular, holiday, Valentine's and specific holidays, but think of it more as seasonal designs to broaden your spectrum with the trends. Of course, you can use these for holidays and come up with designs, but look at it as being maybe seasonal, how you can change your look seasonally, not only with maybe 1 trend, 2 trends, 3 trends, or capability of using all 4 trends. So one thing to do is always keep your website up to date. So if you haven't changed your color palette or even possibly your logo, look at the new color palettes that are available for 2018-2019, the combinations thereof, and maybe think about updating your website. And of course, social media is so important and showing what you can do, what you have done, what's available, and how people perceive you via the internet. And this brings us back to weddings. Of course, the wedding industry is a multi-dollar business per year. And we get a small portion of that pie each year as floral designers and florists. So look at your weddings and see what you are portraying to these customers about your weddings. And you want to stay up to date. So there's several of the trends, and of course, looking at each one of the trends, they're very color specific, but it's how you use those colors and stylings to fit what you're going to be doing or what you can present to your customers. Events follow the same rules and regulations as weddings. Be right on top of the trend and be able to, again, educate your customer instead of them constantly bringing in images to think they're educating us. So you be ahead of the curve and ahead of the trend and follow along as we join in with one of the 4 trends. Our first trend, HANAMI, is literally the translation of the word HANAMI. It's flower viewing, and it refers to the traditional Japanese custom of enjoying the transient beauty of flowers. And what more could that relate to the floral industry? Just the viewing of flowers. People say, why are you so excited all the time about being in this business? And I go, it's such a cool thing just to open a box of flowers or open a container and see the flowers of what you have to design with today. Something new, something different. And of course, each of the flowers in themselves, stem by stem, is beautiful. So when you look at the translation of how flowers can be used for each one of these trends, Laura Dowling has done an outstanding job, an array and an assortment of flowers that are being put together more in an organic styling. But then you're going, well, I like it, but how can I apply it? So I thought, what better way to introduce the trends, not only through Florist Review magazine on January 1, but to roll down Colorado Boulevard with the HANAMI trend colors and flowers on the Grand Marshal's car at the Tournament of Roses again for 2018. It was a great way to show the new trend colors and combinations that can be brought together. And that brings us up to different aspects of applications and colors that go with the particular trends. So when you look at HANAMI and the colorations, you want to look at Design Master colors that we have chosen and worked with Design Master on the selection of these color palettes for each one of the trends. Positioning the paint sticks, it was very important in photography because you're always going to have predominant or dominating colors that work well with the trend, and then you're going to have what is called an accent color that work with the trend. So in HANAMI, you're looking at the predominant colors across the bowl on the paint sticks as peony and carnation red, and so more of a fuchsia and a true vibrant red. Basically, the hunter green becomes your background or foil color, and accent colors such as coral or the Pacific blue become definitely accents in the whole scheme and scope of things. So don't panic too much when you start seeing a lot of teals, what is called Pacific blue here. Of course, it's accent colors and not flower colors. And that's something, again, for your wedding business or other things that you do. Paint the wall that color, get a container that color, which brings us into influences of how trends are either the motivation behind it, the true educational part of learning what a trend is and proceeding with that. So again, the fashion industry plays an important role, not only in the selection of the trends, but how different color palettes or how different fashion houses can use jewel accents, or if we saw celadon being an important thing, the vintage brocade. And you look at how these common, I want to say, just everyday vessels. I have to give it that term, common, because a vase is a vase is a vase. But how do we make ourselves different all the time? How do we set ourselves apart from others? So you can see these are just two plain matte vases in the upper picture, and they've been enhanced and embellished. One with a sequined ribbon, and that is actually a cuff made for floral materials put around the vase. Lori McNorton was instrumental with Florist Review in helping me along with all of this, and she cut out brocade portions of a ribbon from lion ribbon and simply adhered them to that vase, again making it different. And so you want to be creative, and again, that part of setting yourself apart a little bit so it's not common goods all the time going out the door. When you look at design and styling translations of a trend, you can see particularly in the upper left-hand photo, a simple vase filled with Sumatra lilies. It makes a really bold statement. And I think with these bold hues and rich colorations, it's important sometimes maybe things are overworked. And I don't want to say the table centerpiece is overworked, but sometimes flowers in a vase is okay too to set a trend. And you can see the detailed elements that go into a trend and what you need to be following and looking for in designing all those little intricate specialty items that are being placed within a trend or within that design. So you make sure you always cover the detailed elements. Blooming branches, of course, seasonal. We get to our Pinterest pictures that people bring us in, and it's beautiful cherry blossoms. And maybe soon we'll get some, but the rest of the year they're not they're not in season. So it's things that we have to adapt ourselves to, and that's one of the things I want to emphasize is how you adapt these trends to your business. And so Laura Dowling with this particular wreath, of course, she uses cherries, the next phase, and that's one of the things. Again, those little detailed elements of a cherry blossom produces cherries, and then here we are with a wreath filled with cherries. So, of course, blooming branches are important, and that's the term hanami, viewing the flower branches. But what do we do in case we don't have it today? The next best thing. So always remember that when you're doing and working with the actual trend itself, is flexibility on them. When you look at the floral materials that really work into each particular trend, of course, I mentioned the dominating color of Design Master being the peony, but also those peonies like Paul Mitchell Wild, let's say, or Coral Charm. These are actually American grown in Alaska now. And so now the market, you want to know your product and keep up with the growing and availabilities of products too for the consumer of what you can offer them, just like the blooming branches. When are they available? And the seasonal availability of things. Oriental lilies like the Sumatra, things that capture people's attention, not only the color, but the wonderful fragrance that's associated with those lilies. Garden roses, you want to look at a basic rose, of course, the red rose, #1 for the consumer, but there's so many varieties of reds now available, including the garden roses like piano, or the brighter color of Darcy, gives that nod to those deep, what is called carnation red. So don't consider it just a basic flower anymore, and consider it a trend flower. And you look at other flowers like pincushion, smokebush, and you see the beautiful Japanese fan design from Hitomi Gillian and the photograph, and how she used and interpreted the particular trend by all these beautiful blossoms, including the hanging amaranthus. So even though we give you, I'm going to say, the top 10 flowers, there's so many other varieties that are available that work with the specific color palette of a trend. Which leads us to the next trend of crescendo. It's truly a romantic melody, and that melody of low and high notes, subdued colors infused with raspberry. And you want to take a note too with these slides is it's very complex, the flowers nowadays. There's so many varieties that are being put and joined together. As you can see in the photograph, Holly Chappell did the wonderful tablescape piece to the left, and this unique combination of garden picks and intricate detailing of flower materials. Notice the brown lisianthus, a new variety too, and you'll be seeing these pop into the marketplace. If you haven't already, all different types of new varieties. So again, that's one of those key elements with the trends staying on top of it, is what you can offer your customer. When you're looking at the colors in crescendo, I want to get back to those high and low notes. You take basil, for instance. Basil is the organic color base to the trend. Robin's egg is actually that accent color. Again, don't fear that color being in flowers, but just use it as an accent color. If it's a container, if it's ribbons, other types of accessory items that might be added in, think of it as that robin's egg. Then also the raspberry, I mentioned the high note. That's going to be the spark, the hook, what makes the trend really, really pop to these subdued colors of beech, blush, and hyacinth. When you look at color selections and all the different elements that go into play with a trend, the Pantone color of the year is ultraviolet. And it is very common when a color of the year like that is introduced, the consumer picks up on it and gravitates toward it immediately. So with crescendo, you'll see that a lot of the lavender tones and purple tones are being used in this particular trend. Verito Vasquez created this incredible artful necklace piece, which uses all the layered metals. One thing to remember with all four trends this time around, the metals are not by themselves. We're looking at colors that are layered and layered upon themselves as far as metallics go. So here's a great example of layering metallics. And with the view of the mantle top, you can see the matte colored glass that's being introduced. And these can also be achieved by a simple Design Master spray and clear glass. It works incredibly well. But this is another way of those how-tos that you can do and set yourself apart. Modern earthenware. We've seen different styles and different patterns of earthenware and things, but notice that matte finish again, even in the pottery pieces. And then back once again, that fearful robin's egg. Don't be scared of it, but use it as an accent color in your trends. When you look at translations of how design styles and design palettes work together, chosen here were just really the lavender or purple palettes. So the living room setting, you can see that in crescendo, you can see those low notes all combined. The beautiful roses and loose styling, very organic-like, placed in a very traditional type of home setting. That robin's egg accent as the pedestal stand, and you look at the wreath that was created by Laura Dowling. You can see the different shades and palettes of that hyacinth and the blush being brought together, and a tad bit of raspberry thrown in there to bring it to life. And so it's like a gardener was conducting the color palette. And I always, when teaching floral design too, I always say, let the flowers work for you sometimes. You know, sometimes we fight things a little too much, and that's why I tucked in these sweet peas. They look like they're dancing with nature already, and that's the interpretation like of the wreath or the design itself. The flowers are a little bit more casual, a little bit more free-flowing, and again, letting nature do a lot of our work. And I mentioned weddings at the beginning. Weddings, again, are an important portion of the floral industry. And when you look at weddings and how to apply this, not only should you be updating what you have to offer, but look at the new stylings that are available of bridal bouquets, the cascading, other crescent shapes that flow and cascade down, the looser designs, even combinations of a multitude of floral blooms, and which you see to the left upper hand side, the raspberry, the high notes in that real subdued palette. Again, the lavender and purple is going to be very strong for 2018 as far as the wedding industry goes. People will be asking more and more for lavender purple to go with their blush colors. Or this is a way you can educate your customers about adding a little bit of spunk, little bit of flavor, little bit of spice, that high note into their basically dull, subdued wedding. When you look at also the combination of materials that go into it, you can boost your wedding business with just these current styles and the infused color palettes. That whole individuality is so important to our business. People want attention when they call a florist. People want to be romanced, not only with the flowers, but by our customer service. They want to feel like we are in charge of the game. So with the trends, you can be that person and be confident at what you do, and not only just the wedding work, but everyday work. So again, if somebody walks in, and I'll get into this, and say, he has a pink suit, don't question it. Go for it and move along with it. So with the flowers, I'm sure the growers in California and the American grown people are so excited that eucalyptus has been put into, I want to say, almost every bouquet we see in any place in time. So it's a wonderful kind of foliage to use. There's so many varieties of eucalyptus. So just, you know, for yourself, check it out. Get online, check the American Grown site, check the California Cut Flower Commission site, or simply type in Google eucalyptus and you'll see how many varieties are available. One other thing about consumer relationships and that customer service part, and I want to say even back to the design room, we say Christmas greens. What do we mean by Christmas greens? You know, evergreens. Why don't you call things by its true name? Carolina sapphire. It's a really cool kind of foliage that is associated, I want to say, with Christmas mainly, but you're going to see other types of evergreens being worked into trends more and more as we get into even green bouquets, green on green. And of course, the predominant flower that's such a standout because it's unusual is the rose lily. It's like a double or quadruple basic oriental type of lily. It's a great piece to use, comes in an assortment of colors, but again, know your different flowers and what's going to be available. I mentioned the Lysianthus, so even check that out. What new varieties are out there? Is it a single? Is it a double? What are you getting? So again, know your product and how to use it. And when you look at simple things like ribbon, I wanted to show you this particular photograph because I had fun creating it. And it's a round bouquet done on a form, but instead of your traditional, and I hate to say number 40 satin ribbon bow stuck on something, these are actually ribbons that have been cut into squares and applied to the top of the form of the bouquet. So it's, again, something else that sparks a little thing. You might not want to do it every day, but again, it's one of those items that should spark your interest and spark the consumer's interest in how to apply ribbons in a different format. When you look at Kaleidoscope, what can I say about Kaleidoscope? Embracing anything goes vibe. And this whole thing about 1950s farm and line and 1970s pop art reinvented, it looks like, we've reinvented the classics, those geometric patterns, but just really in a contemporary styling. And the colors of Kaleidoscope, you go, whoa, that's a bit bright, but look at the two colors that are on the bottom layering of the paint sticks, the fuchsia and tangerine. Take those away from the color palette, and what are you left with? Spring green, teal blue, lake and sprout. And so the blue-green is going to be a very important color combination throughout 2018. But for the trend portion of it, here we wanted to throw in those accent colors and give you a little bit of umph and spark to the palette itself. Again, you see classic forms like the Greek key ribbon being used against marble. Marble is going to be very important. Concrete, sleekness of lines and proportions within this particular palette. So the influences are artistic and this whole retro feeling, mosaic tile. And ink is the new black. So Design Master Ubermatte ink, you'll want to take a look at it for that new color. And then I have to get into made for me. I actually asked Janet the other day, I go, made for me, what does that mean to you? So she gave me her take on it. But when you look at made for me, how perfect is that for the floral industry too? People are want that customization of work or products for themselves. God, this was made for me. Well, we do that on a daily basis. So why don't we enhance what we do on a daily basis? Get our designs, again, unique designs and blooms being brought in. And that's a way to even enhance and produce more products for the consumer, that repetition and repeat of customer. So made for me, and that anything goes vibe. If you haven't heard yet, major stores and manufacturers are removing gender-specific titles. So instead of boy, girl, it's for the kids. It's kind of like looking at those tennis shoes. They're woven and embroidered. A classic version of Converse tennis shoe brought to the new age. So even all of these new forms of classic items is what we're getting at about you staying on trend. Keep your eyes and ears open to all these different aspects that are happening in our marketplace. And the translation of these items really becomes more textural art. It's how the designers interpreted this trend. So Anina Norwood completed the piece on the left-hand side. Yes, look closely. Those are green beans and yarn put together. That's one of the things too with the great use of succulents and the specialty Phalaenopsis blooms. It creates an interest and you want to continue looking at it. So I would say visual display for sure, don't pass it by. That's what it grabs your eye, and it's that hook again that gets people interested. Oh my God, this florist is talented. This florist is unusual. I wonder what else they can do. If they can come up with this, what else can they do? So looking at Michael McCarthy's work, this is actually a cuff piece for a bridal piece. It could be used for prom. It could, again, anything goes. It's one of those general pieces that can be associated with different realms of use. So bright colorations, the fuchsia, Phalaenopsis, and It all translates back to the imaging of home decor or home design. You can see the 50s form and line with the abstract feeling in the painting that's positioned here along with these textural art compositions. In looking at trend colors, of course, with Design Master, we chose 6 colors per trend. But when you're looking at utilizing the trends, maybe for your shop or promoting a color or colors, you want to be able to look at the setting that those are going in. If it's your store or someone's home that you're going to be placing flowers in, look at the complete surroundings. So given an example of the photograph on the left, you look at the sleek modernization of this particular photo, and it's concrete, aluminum, and glass with an accent of orange. So in the actual photo shoot for the trends, this particular home setting was very similar. And so chosen were the tangerine color, the orange colorations, along with a green for that back to nature feeling. Concrete, aluminum, and glass were also incorporated in the design. So when you, again, you don't have to use all 6 colors, but be confident with your selection when you're choosing the coloration you want to combine together. The flowers of Kaleidoscope can be quite unusual or quite different or quite seasonally ordinary. But the Gerber, there's so many forms, shapes, and colors of Gerbers. These are a great addition and a very youthful flower. The Brasilia, the berry, always an interesting item to be put together. The pincushion protea, again, shows something that's a little bit different. I mentioned seasonal availability of flowers such as marigolds, ranunculus, and the zinnias. But don't be afraid to use white flowers even in this trend, along with the blue and white and the green color palette. WILDROOT, one of those things. It's drawing upon the simplicity of going back to one's roots. You know, the modern farmhouse. Look at the photos. Texture is key to this trend. And the colors of WILDROOT, I want to dissect the photograph just a little bit for you again. If you look at the top 3 layers on the paint sticks, the mist, the gray flannel, and the lavender, those would be considered home decor colors or fashion colors or even textile colors. Yes, there are flowers that are subdued grays like the dusty millers and that are so popular, some of the eucalyptus, again, the lavenders, but those are based off of home decor colors that can translate to flowers. But again, the 3 accent colors that are brought together with this WILDROOT, look at the tomatoes. The heirloom tomatoes give us the colors naturally. The radish color, the salmon, and the light ochre. It's all presented there for you in nature. And that's what I was mentioning earlier. Let nature do some of the work for you when you're trying to do color combinations. Just open your eyes and look out the window. So with the influences that are brought into WILDROOT, we have the aged copper. It's not just the shiny, bright copper anymore. It's aged and then handcrafted. Laura DeLuga did the piece in the upper left-hand corner, and it's a combination of materials like the pomegranates and the silver tree and the proteaceous materials. And it gives that very handcrafted, gathered look. And also in there, she combined some of the new Oasis natural wrap on there. So take a look at those. It's kind of a great item that can be incorporated. And you'll notice also gray washed. It's one of those things, instead of whitewashed or this washed or that washed, gray washed items. And those of you that are so over burlap, We welcome jute and muslin into the play of trends now. So you'll be seeing more of these two items being incorporated not only into design work, event work, and wedding work. So take a look and utilize those with your reclaimed wood and stone. In the translation of designing for a space, you want to know where your designs are going. And a lot of times it's just back to customer service of asking questions, asking for photos of where it's going. Personal attention is key, and that customer service equals good customer satisfaction when you go through all the steps of asking these particular items. So when you look at the photograph, this particular item in the home setting was a grand scale. And I want to think of it back to your roots. Modern farmhouse. My God, this house was bigger than a barn. And if you can tell, the lamps 3 foot tall. So scale and proportion are very important, not only in design work, but where you're going to be placing your floral materials and design completions in. So always know what you're going for, looking for, and have those as key factors in placing materials. Again, still life paintings, it comes back to almost that Dutch master feeling that we want all these intricate blooms being brought together. The hybrid lilies, the bicolor lilies. You can see the gray wash containers brought into play here, and those specialty blooms. And I want to say cultivated garden, fruits and vegetables and produce are going to play an important role in WILDROOT. And looking at the flower wall that's been so popular, what's the next best step? So in creating a photograph for the trends brochure, this is a combination on the photo on the left. It's actually made out of rustic wire, tubes, and seasonal cuts, and the zinnias in there. So this would be kind of a cool item, I think, even for displaying, because you can use the form over and over again. So it becomes that European style or crafted design of reuse and usability over and over again, the recycle type of program, that we're not just pitching everything away all the time. So always consider that, and that's one of those trend items and trend aspects to look forward to in 2018, and of course expanding into 2019, that we're going to see more and more. But John Regan did this particular design. It's back again. It looks like really a grand masterful painting, and it's truly something he composed for an event with the Banksia protea, all those beautiful texture layers. So again, texture is key in this particular WILDROOT trend. The flowers. Actually, this photograph was so amazing because it looks like the painting behind all the flowers come to life out of the painting, but it's reality. And that's what I want to say about the trends. This is reality. And these are the trends for 2018, 2019 to be put to use. Again, with the flowers, I mentioned the Banksia, all the different types of proteaceous material. Garden roses, there's a plethora of garden roses out there that work so well with this color palette. The specialty lilies, bicolor lilies, the gerondo, the dome-shaped multi-petal Guerrero daisy, kale, mentioned the produce. So those kinds of items being brought in, and garden cuts, like lavender, mint, herbs, some of those specialty items, again, that are going to set yourself apart and your design work apart from others. So with trend applications, now that we've covered all 4 trends, I want you to plan and set your goals ASAP. Start today. It's no better time to do it. But plan ahead. Plan and see what's available, not only from growers, but what's available for containers, things you can combine together, and then apply these colors and themes to your visuals, visual display, your website, creating trend theme floral designs, maybe for the special of the week. See how it works, special of the month. Try different things, aspects, and promote those not only on your website, but also in social media. Make sure your wedding portfolio is up to date. If it is not up to date and it does not have current styling and you're still stuck with balls of roses, look forward to the future of updating those things. So gather some flowers together, put some items together, photograph it, put it on your website, put it in social media. Use our terms, use the names HANAMI, Kaleidoscope, CRESCENDO, WILDROOT, and people can start relating to the trend of the American Floral Trends Forecast. And with this whole trends, it would not be possible without, of course, Florist Review and their grateful contribution to it all, and Travis Rigby, the owner, with pushing us forward with trend consultants such as Laura Dowling, Chris Kratt, Bill Schaefer, Michelle Bouchon, Hatomi Gillian, Kelly Mace, Holly Header Chapel, Charlie Groppetti, and Gretchen Sale. This seems like, the Oscars or something. And our floral designers, Holly Chapel again, Laura DeLuga, Laura Dowling, Mandy Majerick, Michael McCarthy, Laurie McNarton, Anina Norwood, John Regan, and Verito Vasquez. And of course, without our sponsors through the American Grown, and those farmers and growers provided us all the beautiful products. Design Master working with Gretchen Sale on instrumental of choosing the 6 strong, confident colors. Oasis products for their wonderful new items that are being brought, and Lion Ribbon for their masterful art of textile industry, and again, Florist Review for their contributions. And look for, in this coming year in Florist Review, quarterly updates too. Weddings in April, holidays in July, and parties and events in October. And so we can keep you up to date on the latest evolutions, turning trends into traffic, which equals what? Dollars and cents, meaning cents. I hope you take away with you today the 4 trends. Of course, this will be available for questions and handouts, and you'll be able to review the webinar once again if you didn't catch it all, and we'll turn it back over to Janet and for questions.
Keith, thank you so much for sharing a lot of great information. Those were beautiful images and beautiful flowers. We are open for questions now. So remember, if you have a question, simply type it in that question box on the upper right side of your screen. And we've got our first question is from Roberto. We have a small shop, he says, so they're trying to incorporate all 4 of those trends. Might be a lot for them. Is there one trend that they should focus on to try and show their customers that they're staying current on the trends?
One trend out of all 4 and a small shop. One of the things to consider is who are you catering to? What does your business relate? I mean, it's like, what is your objective of how your business appeals to the consumer? Is it WILDROOT or is it HANAMI? Are you a little bit more country, or are you a little bit more bold, or do you like Kaleidoscope? Do you think your customers would appreciate Kaleidoscope? So again, I would look at each one of the 4 trends and pick something that relates to your shop and how you want to maybe even reinvent the way you are perceived by your customers by choosing one of the trends. Of course, with the trends, and you can tell stories in a very small space even. But again, if you want to pick and choose something, again, to reinvent yourself, I would say, where is your customer base coming from and who do you want to appeal to in your marketplace?
All right. Deanna said she has an older store that needs a lot of help in updating. And she wants to know, what are your suggestions to help bring them into 2018, with the trends?
Ah, the first thing, a can of paint is usually pretty cheap to buy. Labor, we know, might not be so, but get out get out some paint. Pick and choose some colors. I mean, be bold. I mean, go with the Pantone Ultra Purple right off the bat in your window, and then you'll be amazed at what you put in front of that color that's going to look like something. So I would say, run out, go get some purple paint, and paint your store background for your window tonight. Don't delay. That's one thing about trends. If you go, I'll do it next week, or I'll do it, we're going to be busy because Valentine's is coming up, it's not going to happen. Go paint your window tonight.
Awesome. Karen wanted to share, I guess she has seen Laura DeLuga has showcased a trends wall, and the wall can showcase the colors, themes, or the containers. She thought that was a great idea for small space and multiple stores. So we also have another question from Jackson. He said weddings are a large part of their business. The Country Look or WILDROOT is kind of that country store, but he was wondering what could they also do to incorporate the other trends that you've shown?
Well, when you consider the trends and trend colors, and you say country look, or let's say the wild root, since that is the trend, and you look at the color palette, don't be afraid to step outside the box, even on the trends. And let's say for, crescendo, you want to bring that color palette into more of the wild root look. It's perfectly fine to step outside and look at other color combinations, because not everyone who wants this, I want to say, and I don't want to use the word country so much, but let's say garden wedding, or barn weddings, or outside type of venues, might not want those particular color palettes. So it's okay to use the HANAMI bold color palette range in the translation of the trend. So again, I don't want to veer you way off of each trend, that each one has to stay intact. But again, keep your eyes and ears open for the different color palettes that are available through each trend, that you can adapt those into your look that you want to sell.
All right, thanks, Keith. We have a question from Tim. He's new to Floral, and he wants to know if you have any suggestions for him to find what's trending around his area.
And what's the area? Do we know? Or do you want me to just in general?
I guess we'll go for general right now because I don't know, and I'll let you know. Lebanon,
Okay.
New Hampshire.
Cold country, right? When you look at trends, I would look and East Coast versus West Coast. The American Floral Trends forecast is for America. So these particular trends relate to not only the United States, but in product development and flower growing, California versus American grown flowers. So regional does play a part in the trends itself. So some influences might be stronger in other parts of the country, like New Hampshire. So take a look around, even go to your maybe larger cities, if you're in a small town, and see what's available. See how the influences of major stores are in that area. And then that will kind of give you a guideline too of where to take your direction to.
Thank you. We've got a question from Karen. She said the trend names such as HANAMI and KALEIDOSCOPE and WILDROOT, are they ones that the design consultants that you guys have created, or did Pantone put those forward? And that they're wondering if they use those names, would clients like understand that?
Those four names for the trends were developed through the trend consultants from surveys out for names for each one of the trends. And then the literally brainstorming what was going to be the best name for each one, which we felt these four names were the very strongest. As I can tell you, just like Hanami, it literally, that translation of flower viewing, so it pertains so closely to each one of the trends, the name itself. These are part of the American Floral Trends Forecast, but you are more than welcome, to utilize the wording or the term kaleidoscope, WILDROOT, crescendo, or hanami. And since this is the American Floral Trends is the predominant style report for the industry, it is out there. So again, the consumer will be finding this not only on social media and through Pinterest, those avenues. So yes, they should have an understanding of those four terms. So again, feel free to use them.
I think using them will help elevate the professionalism too of the florists.
Yes.
All right, well, it looks like we're out of questions for today. So we just want to thank everybody for attending today's webinar. If you missed a portion of the webinar or would like to view it again, a replay is available and will be available later this week on FTD Mercury Network's Florist YouTube channel. The webinar materials, a PDF of these slides is available on FTDI. We will be sending you guys a very brief survey, as always, to gather your feedback on today's webinar. So please just take a minute to complete the survey, help us improve future webinars and other education programs for you. Our next FTD webinar is scheduled for Tuesday, March 13th. Kristen Naher, the CEO of Bootcamp Digital, will share what makes a website really successful and how to set your website up for success. Registration is already available at ftdi.com, so please be sure to register as soon as possible to reserve your spot. Again, thank you, Keith, for sharing a lot of great information about the new American Floral Trends Forecast for 2018-2019. And this concludes FTD's webinar, American Floral Trends Forecast 2018-2019, Turning Trends into Traffic. Thank you, everyone.